Welcome everyone to another episode of Nikon TV. My name is Chris Ogonek, your host, and let's jump right on in today because we have got a lot to talk about. What have we got to talk about? Well, last week we went and announced the new Z800mm f6.3 VRS line lens. So we're going to be talking about that. But the majority of the episode is actually going to be talking about firmware. Now, we did announce some firmware autofocus upgrades for the Z6 II and Z7 II, but what we're going to focus on today is the firmware 2.0 for the Z9. Really exciting. So much to talk about, not only on the video side, which we kind of hinted at before, but also on the photography side as well. But before we get there, let's go back and talk about the Z800mm. Now, I know there's a ton of information already on the web, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I definitely do think that this lens deserves some recognition. There is a lot to like about this lens, and as you can tell, as I'm just kind of quickly holding it around and spinning it, how light it is. And there's two main things that I do really think people are going to like when it comes to this 800mm. First is the size and the weight. So right off the bat, this obviously has a hood on it, but if I pop that off, you can see it is relatively compact for an 800mm. And if I compare that with the current F-mount version, you can see by the numbers, it's 16% smaller. It is significantly smaller. And then you would also have to add in the FTZ adapter for this as well, obviously, if you're going to be using it on a Z body. But the biggest difference between these two lenses, to be totally honest, and it's the reason why it's sitting on my leg right now, is the weight. So this lens is considerably heavier. You're looking at over 4,500 grams, even more than that when you add the FTZ adapter in there. The new 800mm, well, this is 2385. That's 2,385 grams in comparison to the old one. So definitely some major weight savings that you're getting by going with this new lens. Now, how did we go and do that? Well, when you go and look at the optical formula in here, there's a number of ED elements. There's an SR, that's a short wavelength refractive element in there. We have fluorine coating on the front, but the big aspect that allows us to shave so much weight off of here is the PF. That's the phase for now lens element that we use to go and design our PF lenses. Started with a 300mm, then up to the 500, and now we're into the Z800mm. So this is over 50% lighter than that 800mm when you go and add in the FTZ adapter onto it. So really crazy how much smaller it truly is. Now, I already kind of showed you the hood, but one thing I wanted to kind of mention with this is how it actually attaches to it. So you can see I just slide it on and then it locks and that's it. It's all good to go. So it's a one-handed on and off because there's a little unlock button here. You unlock it and then pop. Comes right off. So really cool. I know it's a 800mm. Why am I talking about the hood? It's those little things that sometimes kind of set a product apart. Now, I'd say there's two main things that people are really going to be excited for. The first, obviously, is the size and the weight, but the other one is the cost. Now, I want to preface this by saying I fully realize that 8,500 Canadian dollars is a lot of money. If I use the words inexpensive, if I go and use the words a deal, a steal, anything along those lines, please do not let me fool you into thinking I do not take that as a lot of money. But when you compare it to the other exotic 800mm lenses out on the market, it truly is a bargain. It really is. So $8,500 for the new Z800. If you go and look at this older F-mount 800, this is 20,000 Canadian dollars. There is also obviously the Canon new 800mm that they have. That's over $22,000. So when you compare it against what else is out there in terms of the exotics, and the reason I'm comparing against those and maybe not against another 800mm that is out there as well, is it has a much faster aperture than that other kind of consumer level lens. And that faster aperture is only a third of a stop slower than the 5.6 of the F-mount. So 6.3 is really not that, nothing to sneeze at when you look at all the current cameras that we have right now, the high ISO capabilities, a third of a stop, that's nothing. So with the size, weight, and cost, I think this truly is going to open up to a lot of photographers a focal length that they maybe wouldn't have even considered before because, well, let me show you. When you went and bought the 800mm, you got this. You got a trunk. You got a trunk with it along with the expensive and heavy lens. Well, obviously we shaved a lot of weight, we saved a lot of size, and we also saved a lot of size in the actual carrying around of it as well. So you don't have to go and have a huge bag. You can just go and throw it in that very small little carrying case. That's the same carrying case that comes like with our 180 to 400. Well, similar, it's a little bit different. And same actually with the 400mm. The Z 400mm f2.8, very similar bag that comes with as well. So you're able to carry it around, you're actually able to take it places with you because that current F mount, you would only really take it if you absolutely had to. I have a ton of camera bags and this actually fits in a couple of my camera bags that I actually have upstairs. So you're able to put this, I went out traveling with this last week. And with this, I had the lens in there, I had two Z9 bodies, I had two teleconverters, I had a Z24 to 70 f2.8, I had 3 batteries, memory cards, and a little sensor cleaner blower just in case. And all that fit into one bag. Tell me that is not exciting, that you can actually throw that in there, get it on your bag, get on a plane, and take all of that with you. So really exciting. And I do think it's going to open up for a lot of photographers, obviously more on the wildlife, aviation type of enthusiasts who would want to be going and using this. When I say wildlife, not all wildlife are going to want to utilize this lens. This is a little bit on the far end for some uses. I know Brad Hill, he loves the size, he loves the weight, he's very excited about it, but it's a little bit too far for him. And a lot of wildlife photographers are kind of in that 400 to 600 range is kind of their best choice. But if you're a birder, you always want as much focal length as you can possibly get. And since the Z800mm can go and utilize our teleconverters as well, our Z1.4 getting you up to 1120 millimeters at f9, or you can go and use the 2x teleconverter that gets you up to 1600 millimeters at f13. So a lot of different options with this lens. So if you do need that maximum focal length, then this really is your option. And I really think a lot of people are going to be excited about this. I know the pre-orders of it are already going through the roof, which is just spectacular coming off of our Z9 launch, which we're still getting through our back orders now. So very exciting time. And let me just make sure I didn't miss anything here. Oh, I didn't even talk about image quality, my goodness. So the image quality of this lens, that's another reason why I'm comparing it to the high-end f-mount 800mm or let's say the Canon $22,000 lens as well, because that's the type of image quality that you are getting out of this lens. You are not getting consumer level image quality where you have to worry about sharpness. Do you have to stop down to get better image quality? I've shot this thing almost entirely when I'm out in the field, shooting it fully wide open. I've done testing with it stopping down and there's really no need to. So that's obviously kind of something that we've seen with a lot of our Z lenses over the last couple of years, and it really carries over into this lens as well. So even though it is 6.3, you don't have to worry about stopping down to gain extra sharpness. It's already there. Yeah, so when you compare this versus the F-mount, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to disparage people who own the F-mount version, but this is an incredible lens. The detail, the sharpness that you're getting out of it, it really is impressive. So I'm excited about it. I know a lot of consumers already have put their pre-solds down for it. So it is going to be an incredibly popular lens for the next little while. Okay, so we talked about the 800mm, but now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. Let us talk about Firmware 2.0 for the Z9. Now, when we launched the Z9, now I got to keep this in perspective for you guys. We just started shipping the Z9 under 4 months ago. It was the end of December, back like 3.5 months ago. So the camera's only been shipping for 3.5 months. And at the time we said, okay, well, we are going to be having some video improvements for the Z9, and we kind of said over 8K 60p raw video, and that was cool, but we didn't say anything about the photographic aspect of it. Well, I think people are excited to see how much we've improved on the Z9 in 4 months after starting to ship the camera, which is just crazy. If this was back in the DSLR days, this would not be just a firmware update. This would be a D3S. This would be a D4S moment. This would be a Z9S. But because we have so much capability in terms of changing the software, the firmware of the actual camera itself, we're able to take it leaps and bounds ahead of what it was when it first came out. And it's only been 4 months. Crazy. So let's start with the video, because that's what we teased when we announced the camera, that we were going to be doing a lot of video upgrades. So let's talk about that. Now, the headline for the video firmware upgrade was the raw video. So that's 12-bit over 8K at 60p. So this is using our new NRAW, which is vastly smaller in terms of file size than what you would normally get out of, let's say, a ProRes RAW, which enables us to really pump out a huge amount of data. Now, when I say over 8K, why am I saying it like that? Well, you're actually getting 8.3K of resolution, and the reason for that is you can actually decide whether you want to go and use the UHD kind of aspect ratio, the 16:9, or do you want the more cinematic look of the DCI. So you have the ability to use full DCI at 8.3, or if you want to crop down, that's going to crop off the little bit of the top and bottom and get you down to the 8K. So a lot of flexibility there, up to 60p raw video. Now, we also have ProRes RAW as an option as well. ProRes RAW is 4.1K, and that can be at 2430 or, yeah, but I believe up to 60p as well for that one. But what I don't want to talk about too much is the raw aspect of video, because I think a lot of the viewers here maybe never have even shot with RAW, maybe never even heard of RAW, because when you're shooting raw video, yes, it's just like shooting raw stills. And you go, well, I shoot raw, I take a little bit of extra time, I get better image quality, and I'm good to go. Well, yes, it is a similar premise for video, but it's on steroids, because your computer processor is really going to be taxed, and there's a lot of extra steps that you will have to do on the raw video side of things. So it's not for everybody. It will be for those kind of run gun shooters, the small crew man, where they small manned crew, where they're just going to be essentially be running around trying to shoot shorts with as little gear as they possibly can, but getting the best image quality. That's really where this over 8K 60p comes in. But for a lot of other videographers, they're actually going to prefer some of the other features that come with Firmware 2.0 for the Z9. One of them being the oversampling that's now possible when shooting at 4K, getting you up to 60p. So out of the box, when the camera was shipped a couple months ago, you had oversampling, which is essentially taking all of the pixels and down converting it from 8K down to 4K. And just like when you do that with a stills image, when you go from a larger resolution to a smaller resolution, you're going to get better sharpness and you're going to get better noise. So oversampling is a very good thing. Well, we had oversampling 8K at 24 and 30 frames a second. We had oversampling at 4K at 24 and 30 frames a second. But when you went into 60p, it was not being oversampled. Well, now in the Z9, you can go into the menu and you can tell it, I want you to oversample at 4K 60. So this is going to give you even sharper images, better noise at higher ISOs. So there's no real downside. But keep in mind that when you go and do utilize this feature now, your battery will be used a little bit faster, just because it is quite a bit more intensive in terms of the processor power required by the Z9. So you're going to get amazing image quality, even better than before when you want to go, let's say, go and slow down that action just a little bit more. But just be mindful that your battery is going to drain a little bit faster. Okay, so we've talked about 8K, we've talked about 4K raw video, talked about oversampling. Okay, some other things that while recording, the videographers will really like as a nice little touch. One of them being waveforms. Okay, so what is a waveform? So there's a ton of information out there. I'm sure there'll be a lot of examples out there. But what I'll quickly say about waveforms is it's similar to a histogram, in that a histogram shows you the either bright or the dark areas of a photo. But the downside about a histogram, and one of the reasons a lot of people may not utilize it all that much, is it doesn't really tell you where in the frame those highlight or dark values are, which limits its usefulness, especially in video. So what we've seen with a lot of cine cameras, and it's slowly trickling into the mirrorless world, which is why the Z9 now has it, is a waveform basically takes everything that you get good with a histogram. It will tell you how bright or how dark your tones are in your scene, but it will do that by visually showing you where in the actual frame. So the up and down is the actual, so dark is at the bottom, bright is at the top, and then if you are seeing, let's say in your scene, a very bright spot in the top left-hand corner, well, it's going to show you visually in the waveform. The top left-hand corner is going to be very bright. So you can actually see visually where in your scene you're going to be getting those shadows or highlight areas, which is really beneficial because there's a lot of times you're filming something where you might have something backlit, you might have a little bit of reflection off of from the sun, and you don't care if that's overexposed because you want to expose for your subject. So really, really beneficial. I'd actually love to see personally, this is just a wish that I have, that waveforms would actually be available in stills shooting because it's that beneficial. So really, really cool option. Another option for the videographers is when you go and hit that record button, now you get a really big and red box that pops up around the frame of it, showing you, yes, you are recording, to make sure you don't accidentally not record or you accidentally are recording when you didn't think you were. So a couple other little benefits there. You can also very quickly with one button push jump in and get a full quick custom eye menu that shows you all of your major settings while you're recording. And if you do want to see what resolution you're at, you can quickly look at the top LCD, because before that only showed you stills information. Now, when you're in the video, if you switch that control over to the video side, now you'll get things like your frame rate and your resolution. So just a lot of very small little additions that for videographers can make a really, really big deal. Two of the last little things. One is fine ISO control. So when you are shooting at, let's say, an N-Log, so you want to be very particular. You don't have base ISO of, let's say, 100, you have to start at a higher ISO. And because of that, you want to be careful. You don't want to go too high. Well, now we're able to go and change your ISO in 1/6 increments, giving you that much ability, that much better ability to fine tune your ISO and make sure you don't go too high, but you get the exposure that you want. And lastly, for video, we have something called Fast AF on. Now, Fast AF on, why do we want Fast AF on? Okay, so let me paint a picture for you. So you're shooting a scene, you're walking down the street, you're following a subject, and you purposely have set the autofocus speed. So you're basically letting the camera do its own thing. So you're on, let's say, AFF mode. So it's fully tracking. And when doing that, you've told the camera, I want you to be very slow in your focus speed because you want to kind of have that kind of cinematic, slow focus puller feel to it. And that's great. But halfway through your scene, somebody walks by and now you have to jump focus to them quickly. And then let's say you're going to go and follow them. Well, how do you jump focus quickly without manually doing it when you've told the autofocus to do it slowly? Well, now we can go and customize one of any number of buttons on the camera to be Fast AF on. So when I've been playing around with it, I've had it set to makes sense, the AF on button. And when I go and customize that to be Fast AF on, when you go and push that, even if the camera has been told use slow AF for the majority of the recording, as soon as you go and press that button, boom, it's going to shift really quickly and jump to your new subject, allowing you to jump to your new subject and follow them, get off that AF on button, and it goes back to the smooth and a really nice cinematic look that you get from the slow focus pull. So really, really cool. A lot in there on the video aspect. But for anybody who's not a videographer, who's stuck with me this long, let me go and jump in to the photo improvements. And there are way, way more than I think people expected. The first one is a feature that we actually had back in our Nikon 1 days. So back a number of years ago. And what we're calling it now with the Z9 is pre-release capture. Pre-release capture essentially allows you, when you're in C30, so that's the 30 frame per second full resolution JPEG mode, or C120, which is the 11 megapixel JPEG mode. And when you're in either one of those, when you're tracking or about to shoot some very fast action and you press the shutter down, well, what happens if you miss that action just by a split second, whether it's sports, whether it's wildlife, if you just barely missed it? Well, not anymore with pre-release capture, because as you've been holding that shutter down halfway, you'll see a little confirmation pop up on the bottom of the viewfinder, a little green. And what that's going to tell you is the camera is buffering before you've actually told it to take a photo. So if you missed the action by a split second, well, you've already told the camera whether you want it to record 0.3 second, 0.5 of a second, or a full second before you press that shutter. And you're going to get all of those images saved either at 30 frames a second or 120 frames a second. And then when you do press that shutter, it'll keep saving them as long as you press and hold that shutter as well. So really cool functionality that we did have in the past. I do think one or two other cameras on the market do have something similar to it, but never has it been seen in a full frame mirrorless camera before. So we're really excited about the pre-release capture. But something I know a lot of people are excited for is what you're going to get from the EVF now of the Z9, because natively the Z9, when you go and shoot it, you're going to get a refresh rate at 60 frames per second. Now, because of our dual stream technology in the Z9, I've never actually heard anybody complain about their viewfinder experience when shooting with this. You have no stuttering, you have no blackout whatsoever. It is so good. But now it gets even better, because you have the ability to go and tell the camera, go and shoot or go and refresh at 120 frames per second. Keeping in mind that your battery will drain a little bit faster because it obviously is doing more work for you there, but it's going to mean that when you're tracking that really fast moving subject, when you're panning, you're going to get even smoother views through that already impressive viewfinder. So those two right off the bat are spectacular. Pre-release capture and the 120 frame per second EVF option. Okay, is that it? We're done? Not even close. So now on autofocus, we have the ability to go and customize the size of the AF points to what you, the photographer, actually want. So we obviously have dynamic, we have wide area small, large, we have 3D, we have auto, we have a whole slew of different options. But now you also have the ability to customize. So you have wide area C1, custom 1, and you have wide area C2, custom 2. And you're able to go and tell the camera any basically size from very small skinny box to very large box, anywhere you want that autofocus point to be. You can move the autofocus point, but you can more importantly customize the size of that focus point depending on the particular type of environment that you're shooting at this exact moment. So there's 20 different customizable options that you, the photographer, can now go and select entirely by yourself. Really cool. What else do we have? Oh, so now I'm talking about autofocus. So the autofocus stability has also been improved when talking about subject detection, specifically in low light for the Z9. So absolutely no one is going to complain about that. We've not only given you more autofocus options, but we've also made the autofocus more stable as well. What else do we have as well? Oh, so if let's say you're a night landscape photographer, you're a star photographer, there's already a lot of things in the camera, in the Z9, that you're going to love, whether it's the better viewfinder experience with almost no noise when you're looking up at a really dark sky. We have the warm color display option. There's a lot in there for you to like already, but now we're improving it even more. So if you go and shoot bulb, right? So that's you going and telling the camera, start the exposure, and then in 222 seconds, that's how long of exposure, let's say, you want. In 222 seconds, you're going to have to stop the camera. Now, how do you know when to stop the camera? Well, you'd have to go and have your phone or a stopwatch with you, and you'd have to go and start as soon as you press the shutter, and okay, so 220, 221, 222, and stop it then. Okay, well that works, but it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. Well, now we have a count up, not a countdown. I know it sounds a little awkward to say, but it's a count up. So when you go and press the bulb option to start the exposure, you'll actually see 1, 2, 3, 4, 220, 221, 222. And then you'll be able to stop exactly when you want based on how long of an exposure you know that the camera was shooting for. There's one other thing that I mentioned, warm color displays. That allows you to change some of the colors and some of the menus to red and black to preserve your night vision when you're out shooting stars. Well, some photographers may not actually like that. For whatever reason, they may prefer to kind of keep the color of the menus, but they just want the menus to be darker. So now we have the ability to go in and turn the EVF brightness down 2 more levels, just giving those night photographers who want to preserve their night vision that much better of an experience when they're shooting. Okay, so what else do we have here? Well, we also have a Snapbridge as an added capability where when you have the camera set up, let's say right now, because you're watching this, oh, I didn't even mention, you're watching this right now, April 14th, the firmware was announced, but the firmware will not actually be available till April 20th. So at that point, within a couple days after that, it's going to be allowed to be downloaded through Snapbridge and go put on your phone. Well, my whole big long story about this is Snapbridge. So you're using Snapbridge and you want to automatically transfer files from your camera to your phone. Well, automatically it's going to go and send 2 megapixel files. Well, with this latest update, you can actually go and download automatically 8 megapixel files. So if, let's say, you're having to file some images to your editor and you want something larger than 2 megapixels, you can now easily do that. Now, this very, very last option here, one of the last improvements, there are way, way more than what I've even got through here, but this one is aimed directly for somebody like Brad Hill. So I've made him wait through this entire video to go and see this feature, and it is because it is utilizing the recall shooting functions option. Now, currently, recall shooting functions, if you're not aware of what it is, you can go and change one thing in the however many we have in there, or you can go and change all of them. And with one button push, you customize it to bring up your recalled shooting functions. Makes sense. Aptly named function. And with one button push, you're changed from, let's say you're shooting a grizzly bear. Grizzly bear in the river, it's going after some fish. And you're set to your fast action settings, right? Fast shutter speeds, high ISOs, all that. But at the flip of a switch, you want to be able to go to slow shutter speed options because that bear's now stuck his head under the water and he's going to come up, and what's he going to do? He's going to shake, and you want to go and really kind of use a slow shutter speed to capture that movement. Well, you can go and do it manually, but if you're jumping back and forth, it's a bit of a pain in the butt. Recall shooting functions is designed specifically for that. So you can go and have, with one button push, your slow shutter speed options be brought in, and that's amazing. But what if you're using that for an extended period of time? That means you have to hold in that button the entire time. And if you're trying to change autofocus modes and do all sorts of other things, it can be a bit of a pain in the butt. So what we now have is recall shooting functions hold option. And that basically just means you press the button and your settings are now held until you either press the button again, or if the standby timer of the camera goes off, or you turn the camera off. So that is something that I know Brad has wanted since the very, very beginning of when the Z9 was announced, because he utilizes the recall shooting functions all the time, and he wants to have the ability to not just be able to press it, but to have press and have your settings be held there. Whew. All right, so that is a lot of information. There's even more that I didn't get into because it's kind of more fine detail stuff. What I just talked about today was the major stuff that I got excited for, that I know people are really, really going to be jazzed about. So if there's anything you guys want for future updates, throw it in the comments below. I get a lot of my ideas from me shooting, but I also have a lot of my ideas from people, from shooters who actually just tell me, oh, I've been using the Z9, I would love this. So throw those in the comments below, what you guys would want. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again. If there's any ideas you guys have for future episodes, future guests that you would want me to have on to discuss things with, future topics, throw that down in the comments below, and I'll make sure that if I can, I'll definitely go and do it in the future. But Until the next episode, I'm going to say everybody stay safe, and I'll see you then.